I'd say that the lowest point in my life so far was around June 2020. I was attending university at the time, my second year, in fact, and the world had just gotten hit with a global pandemic, the likes of which hadn't been seen in almost 100 years. It was a tough time for everyone, and I was no exception. Whilst my housemates had all gone home to be in lockdown with their families, I chose to stay put, purely because the internet speed was better, but it wasn't just because of that. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want my mother, my father, to see what I'd become. You see, since I was 15, I struggled with controlling my moderation with alcohol, and this issue was at its peak during university. Uni culture lives and breathes alcohol. In hindsight, it's actually really disturbing how much of a part of life it is there, and how much it's encouraged and advertised by the establishment there. It's the last place I'd ever recommend an addict to go and live in. But yet, there I was, in lockdown, surrounded by empty rooms, empty corridors. It was just me. I didn't care though. I thought it was great. I'd get to drink as much as I like without judgment. I could play video games all day, every day. I relished in it, bragged about it even. I thought it was cool. My uni work was very much out of the window at this point. I was a media studies student. Almost all of our work requires going out and about for filming, which is kind of difficult during a mass lockdown. I never attended a single online class after March 2020. Things got dark pretty quickly after lockdown started. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that in 2019 I was also introduced to cocaine. Or at least what I thought was cocaine. It was really cheap and cocaine is typically quite expensive, so I was likely getting something far more dangerous. During lockdown, the dealer I had would drop it inside the compartment of a lamppost, which I would then pick up. I never even saw the face of the person I was buying drugs from. By all accounts, every action I took was idiotic. But I needed to do it. When I was sober, my brain was just a nightmare. My mind would race around. I'd pace back and forth, talking to myself for hours. I couldn't concentrate ever. I felt like I needed something to alter me just so I could feel normal. This was an issue in tandem with my horrendous alcoholism. I lived about a 5-minute walk away from a big store when I was at uni, and because they had so much stock before the pandemic, everything was selling for way cheaper than usual, especially alcohol. I'd arrive at the store at 6 AM right as it opened. I would buy a crate of 20 Budweiser bottles for a measly £10, and I would drink it all in a single day. Rinse, repeat, for months. I got worse by the day. I was broke, too. All my allowance was spent on both drugs and alcohol, little to no food. I was skinny. My ribcage almost showing through my skin, my arms looked like twigs. It all came to a head on a day in June. I was wasted out of my mind more than usual. The last of my alcohol and the last of my coke. It was overwhelming. I was too messed up. And for the first time, I felt like I was actually going to die. And I think subconsciously, that was my intention. I cared so little that I didn't care that I was dying. I was laying on my sofa and I decided to text my mother. This whole time I'd been lying to them, telling them that I'd been working on essays, attending classes, none of which was true. I texted my mum, essentially admitting all of that, but in drunken, incorrectly spelled drivel. After which, I laid my head back, drifted off into what I thought was eternal darkness, knowing that at least I wouldn't be leaving my mum with questions as to why. I was woken up a few hours later by my parents bursting in through my door. Thankfully, I was not dead, but still very drunk and still a little bit high. They took me by force into their car and drove straight back to their home. I cried the entire ride home. I felt like I was a failure, both in the fact that I had failed to have a normal university life like everyone else had, but also that I'd failed to do something as simple as dying. After that, I was forced into sobriety immediately by my parents and I dropped out of university. I haven't spoken to my housemates or uni friends since. I'm still too embarrassed. I'll try to reach out one day, but not anytime soon. Honestly, I was such a mess and a hindrance to all of them during that time that I don't think they'd even want to hear from me. I imagine I'm the main character in a lot of their "we had a guy at university" stories. A few months later, I landed my first actual job as a delivery driver for a fish and chip shop. I still struggled with drinking. My parents tried to stop me, but I was a legal adult by this point. There wasn't much they could do, and to top it off, I was very sneaky about it. I never got as bad as I did during uni ever again, but I still struggled on and off for a very long time. Now, I've brushed over a lot of details in this video. I've failed to mention my years of suicidal thoughts and depression in college before uni, my issues during my first year of uni, and the multiple issues I had after dropping out of uni. But in all honesty, just talking about this one incident it's been a lot for me. Clearly, I'm actually quite traumatized by the whole experience. I'm just realizing that now as I'm talking. I hope that I can tell more stories like this in the future, and I hope you guys are okay with that. I'd like to tell these stories gradually as kind of a form of therapy to hopefully let me leave it all in the past and to be more in tune with the man I am today. A man who I like to think is in stark contrast to the boy that I was before. Today, I hardly drink at all. Not on purpose, I'm not trying to be sober. I've just grown out of it, I guess. The last time I drank was about a month ago. I had 2 pints with some friends at the pub, which is how you should enjoy alcohol. I'm glad I finally figured that out. If anyone is struggling, if my story sounds very similar to yours, just know you're not alone. The people around you want to see you succeed, they care about you. When you're an addict or when you're depressed, you become your own worst enemy. You tell yourself lies that no one cares, that everyone thinks you'd be better off dead because your brain is so full of negativity that the concept of the opposite just appears false. But I'm not an expert and I'm not going to pretend to be, so I've left resources in the description of this video for support. I'll leave you with a quote. It's not original and isn't that great, but I call it my own. Just like every bad time in my life before, this one too will eventually pass. A good time will always be waiting for you. Thanks for watching.